Hello my dear friends, you're in the middle of the Samara channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 15th of August of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, where the Russians during the previous 24 hours improved their position significantly. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the map, as you can see, has been adjusted significantly. We have already discussed the situation during the previous video. We received lots of updates, but during the day the Russian sources continue updating and continue publishing additional videos that we use to add additional territories under complete Russian control. If you remember, more precisely, everything started 2 days ago when pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how the Ukrainian soldiers were raising the Ukrainian flag through different settlements of the Zaporizhzhia direction. Later, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, reported that the Ukrainians managed to retake under complete control 26 settlements of the Zaporizhzhia direction, and Zelensky stated that the Zaporizhzhia counter-offensive operation ended. And 2 days after, the Russian sources published almost the same video where we can see hundreds of Russian soldiers, maybe not hundreds, but dozens of Russian soldiers raising the Russian flag through the Zaporizhzhia direction as well. And as you can see, according to this video, we have recolored the territories back under complete Russian control. At least some territories were recaptured, so that is why the map has been adjusted. More precisely, the Russians published not just the video, the Russians published 5 or 6 videos where we might see how the Russians were raising the flag. So we have a big video with the dozens of episodes. Then a few hours later, the Russian sources published the video from the settlement by the name of Voskresenka, and here we have a few more flags raised by Russians in this area. Probably 30 minutes later, we received another video, this time from the settlement of Myrne. Here we have more flags raised by Russians during the previous 24 hours. Probably an hour later, we received another video where we can see how Russians were waving with the Russian flag on the territory of the settlement of Oleksandrivka. So obviously today is a flag day, and we can say that this entire week is the week of flags, both Ukrainian and Russians. So as you can see, this is the current situation along the line of combat contact. Most likely in coming days we will receive more updates on this matter. We will probably receive more flags both from Ukrainian side and from Russian side, but the most important thing is that the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, announced that their counter-offensive operation ended, so which means that most likely in coming days we'll see more flags from the Russian side. But the northern Zaporizhzhia direction is not the only area where the Russians improved their positions. According to the group of forces east, the Russians also managed to improve their positions, and through the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, more precisely, the Russians established control over the settlement of Rybalske. And this video was published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement were taking place, and during the final part of this video we can see at least 2 flags raised by Russians. So as you can see, during the previous 24 hours the Russians improved their position significantly. Furthermore, when talking about the Zaporizhzhia direction, today we received several reports published by very reliable pro-Russian sources that as a result of clashes, the Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Novoandriivka. So which means that most likely incoming 72 hours or so, we will adjust the map probably, and we will color the territories like this. So the Russians are getting closer and closer to the city of Orekhov, not just from the southeast but also from the southwest. Meanwhile, the Russians continue attacking the territory of the Orekhov agglomeration, trying to soften defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. And currently one thing is clear, that most likely this year the Russians will finish the battle for the city of Orekhov, because I'm not sure whether the Ukrainians are able to hold their positions in this pocket. Furthermore, the Russians began to more precisely intensify their attacks also along the river of Konska, trying to soften defenses and probably trying destroying Ukraine's logistic in this area, which means that maybe the Russians are planning to recapture these territories as well. These fields and the territories to the south of the river of Konska used to be under Russian control at the beginning of this year. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dobropolye direction. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded around the settlement of Serhiivka. And these are the changes on the ground. This is the end of the 14th of August of 2026, and this is already the end of the 15th of August. The Russians improved their positions through the fields. As you can see, we have changed the color of the gray zone, which means that the Russians are getting closer and closer to this settlement as well. So this is a very important village, the village of Serhiivka, that opens the way towards the settlement of Myrnohrad from the northeast. Meanwhile, the Russians continue attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through this territory as well, trying to soften defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. Something big is brewing in this area, and this something big might happen very, very soon. As for the city of Dobropolye, Drushkovka, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just lots of episodes of how Russian drones flying over these cities and attacking vehicles that the Ukrainians with reinforcements and reserves are trying to introduce through these territories. The Russians control the sky. We can see the Russians use hundreds of drones, which means that the battle for these areas are intensifying. As for the Sloviansk Drushkovka, during the previous 24 hours, the most important update was related to logistics. Russia strikes 3 out of 9 Sloviansk bridges since August 3. So 3 bridges were destroyed. There are still 6 bridges in this area, which means that the Ukrainians still have more or less a strong logistics through the entire front line. But obviously, and due to the fact that the Russians began attacking bridges, this means that the Russians first of all will intensify the situation, and the second thing means that the Russians enter the final stage of preparation before the beginning of the major battle for this territory itself. Now let's move further. During the previous 24 hours, both the Russians and the Ukrainians attacked each other with missiles and drones. And probably the most interesting attack was carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how the Ukrainians were launching the Flamingo missiles deep inside of the territory of Russia. And the most important target for Ukrainian sources was the city by the name of Samara. So the distance between possible launching positions of the armed forces of Ukraine and the city itself is around 1,000 kilometers. And later, pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see the approximate route of the Flamingo missile that was launched from the area of the city of Kyiv and that struck the city of Samara. And the sources reported that the main target of the armed forces of Ukraine was this facility. This is a very important industrial zone. Flamingo FP cruise missile strike on Progress launch complex. On the night of August 15, the defense forces struck the Progress rocket and space center in Samara, the only enterprise in Russia for the serial assembly of Soyuz-2 launch vehicles. So this is a very important situation because the Russians use this Soyuz-2 launch vehicle to deploy satellites and the most important thing, to deploy reconnaissance satellites and the analog of Starlink, the satellite internet system Rassvet from Bureau 1440. As of the end of the 15th of August of 2026, we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage or not, whether the Ukrainians managed to destroy this facility and this enterprise. The only thing we have probably is the official message that was made by the local authorities that they managed to evacuate the enterprise before the missile struck the facility, and the sources reported that no casualties among civilians were recorded, which means that probably the Russians managed to save engineers, specialists, and so on. As for the facility itself and as for equipment that was used by the Russians, we don't know, we don't have this information. So anyway, we will understand this within weeks because we will see whether the Russians were forced to change the schedule of their launchings and so on or not. If they don't change the schedule, this means that the damage was minimal. Another important thing worth attention is the number of missiles and drones that the Ukrainians were using. First of all, for example, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning stated that they managed to destroy 598 air vehicles during just the overnight fight, but later pro-Russian sources gave us additional report where we can see the summary of the previous 24 hours, and according to pro-Russian sources, air defense systems intercepted 7 guided aerial bombs, 17 Flamingo long-range cruise missiles, 4 HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems projectiles, and 1,328 drones. So as you can see, the Ukrainians used around 1,400 air means of attack, just probably one purpose: to damage these facilities. So which means that this is a very important attack. That was a very important attack for the armed forces of Ukraine, because they understand that at the moment when the Russians are able to create their own Starlink system, this is going to be probably a game changer, and this is going to be the situation when the Russians will have stable internet, stable connection all over the entire territory of Ukraine without any possibility for the armed forces of Ukraine to change the situation. So that is why the number of air means of attack that were used by the Ukrainians tell us that this is something that the Ukrainians consider very, very serious and dangerous situation, the Russian analog of the Starlink system. And this means that the Ukrainians will do everything they can, no matter the price they pay for this, but with one purpose: to destroy this program or to slow down the program for as long as possible. Anyway, let's wait and see, because of course it is very interesting to understand the Russian official position and to understand whether the Russians suffered losses of this attack or not. Now let's move further. The Russians during the previous 24 hours also attacked the territory of Ukraine. During the night, the Russians used 152 air means. As for the previous 24 hours, lots of explosions were recorded through the Odesa region. So these days, this is not something new. The Russians attacked the city of Odesa almost every single day, and almost every single day we receive updates on this matter. And the Russians attacked the Nikolaev region. Fire anomalies were recorded along logistic lines, and the Russians attacked the Kanatovo airbase. So this airbase was attacked by Russians, and a fire anomaly was recorded. And most likely the Russians attacked this airfield because the Ukrainians most likely used this airfield for MiG-29 aircraft that the Ukrainians use as air defense forces to protect the Odesa region. So we don't know for sure what kind of damage the Russians managed to deal to this airfield, but due to this fire anomaly, we believe that the Ukrainians will not be able to use this airfield for a while, which means that the sky over the Odesa region would become even more unprotected in comparison with the previous days, which means that the Russians most likely in coming days will accelerate attacks through this territory. Anomaly activity was recorded through the northern regions of Ukraine during the previous 24 hours. Pro-Russian sources published lots of videos of how they were developing their new technologies, their new systems of communication with drones, and the Russians were attacking different facilities. We see that the Russians first of all continued developing their software for their drones and the drones themselves. We know that currently the Russians are moving from the 3rd generation drones to 4th and 5th generation of drones, and the Russians furthermore continue developing their drone ports along the border with Ukraine, and the Russians, it seems, are preparing themselves before the beginning of a full-scale late winter military campaign when they will use only probably 4th generation jet drones, missiles, and of course to attack objects of infrastructure through the territory future of Ukraine. And it seems that the Russians are preparing themselves not just before the next or let's say military campaign. The Russians, it seems, are preparing themselves before the situation when they would try to do everything they can with the purpose to force the Ukrainian side to accept Russia's demands and to finish the conflict. So this is the situation right now that we can see along the line of combat contact. Anyway, let's see how the things are going to develop. And that's it for today. The Military with Summary channel reminds us that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.